Welcome. Last time we discussed CC religion and its three parts. A, natural religion, B, religion in the form of art, and C, revealed religion. Today we will take up the final chapter of Hegel's Phenomenology, an introduction to absolute science. CDD, absolute knowledge. In absolute knowledge, or rather knowing, we overcome the defect of revealed religion. That is, by replacing picture thinking with the concept, or religion's content with morality's form. To understand exactly how the defect is overcome, let's first review what the defect in religion is. The defect, in a word, as Hegel says, is that, quote, spirit's religious consciousness of God, the absolute being, is divided from its immediate consciousness of the present world, end quote. That is, the present world does not have the shape of spirit or is unspiritual. A key question is thus, how does the world come to be spiritual or acquire the shape of spirit? In brief, spirit for Hegel is simply knowledge of self in other. Thus, the world becomes spiritual, or Reich Gottes, when consciousness, when the self is able to see itself in the world and all it contains. Now, Hegel alluded to this defect at the beginning of his discussion of religion, where he stated that, quote, the perfection of religion consists in spirit in its own world, its immediate consciousness, and spirit in religion, its religious consciousness, becoming the same or identical, end quote. What is important, as we will see, is that by this identity of the two, Hegel means that spirit in religion, which involves an otherworldliness or temporal and spatial beyond, is to utterly collapse into and fuse with spirit in its own world. Specifically, that is, into the reciprocal recognition that is absolute spirit and Reich Gottes. Hegel further says that it is precisely due to its picture thinking that religion itself is not able to achieve its perfection and realize the identity of the two, which can only be realized by spirit's transcending its picture thinking, its mere consciousness of an other or object, and advancing to absolute knowing and the concept. That is, quote, in order wholly to resolve therein the form of objectivity in the concept, which equally embraces within itself its own opposite, end quote. Indeed, Hegel further tells us that the concept and spirit are one and the same. And this is because both involve a knowledge of self in one's other or opposite. Thus, as Hegel reveals in religion's final paragraph, revealed religion's defect consists in a double alienation and dividedness. That is, due to its picture thinking, it is unable in the present to achieve a unity or reconciliation with one, the absolute being itself, God or Christ, and two, with the present world. In the first paragraph of Absolute Knowing, Hegel tells us the precise way religion's defect and double alienation can be overcome, namely by overcoming religion's picture thinking, quote, and form of objectivity, that is, its consciousness of an object as such, end quote, which Hegel says was already overcome in the course of the Phenomenology and happened with the unification of consciousness and self-consciousness, which resulted in the unification of self and object. And what is very important, this is a self-other unity which is spirit precisely, as well as the concept. Thus, the solution to the problem, to the defect, occurs when spirit or consciousness is able, via the concept, to see just itself, both in the object that is God and in the object that is the world. And this is exactly what Hegel sets out to do in this final chapter and shape of consciousness Hegel calls absolute knowing. The goal and task here is to unify both consciousness and self-consciousness and religion and morality or conscience. Hegel begins by saying that, quote, consciousness must know the object as itself, end quote, something that will make the object a truly spiritual being. He then divides the task of overcoming the double alienation into two parts. In part 1, paragraphs 790 to 793, Hegel will show how the self will come to see itself in the object that is the world. In part 2, paragraphs 794 to 797, he will show how the self will come to see itself in the object that is God, the absolute being or Christ.